Continue to unpack that story and a whole lot more, and even a sense perhaps of how the elections felt for business. We chat to Business Unity SA CEO Tanya Cohen, who joins me now in studio. Tanya, thank you so much for the time. The elections go according to plan?
Well, I think what we saw is South Africans coming out and voting, exercising their democratic rights.
Yeah.
To a large extent, it's a great equalizer because everyone has one vote. And I think the fact that we had all the political parties playing fair game, the way in which parties conducted themselves, the way in which the IEC conducted the whole elections, I think it's done the country credit.
Yeah. Worried at all about the voter participation? 66% isn't a lot, and I know it's a global phenomenon, but surely that should still be a concern.
I think it's a sign of a maturing democracy. The fact that voters came out, 66% is still a good turnout.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that people don't feel that they have to, that their lives depend on it, is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Fair assumption and comment on that one. Let's talk about how Business Unity views the results itself. The ANC doesn't get that 66%, and it hasn't for quite some time now. The last time was 2004, where it got that 69%, right? And that was very, very massive. But it doesn't get the numbers it used to. Is this still good for democracy in South Africa?
So I think what it's signalling is really the unification process that is required.
Yeah.
It's showing that as a country, in terms of if we are going to move forward, if we're going to turn the economy around, what we really need is the participation of all the main political parties. They need to be actually focused on the economy and making sure that we achieve what we need to do as a country.
Yeah. Is President Cyril Ramaphosa to perhaps lead us in the right way as Business Unity, a man who's formerly and I suppose in many ways currently still in business? Is he the right man to lead South Africa?
So I think the changes that we've started to see during the previous term are the types of changes that we want to see. But we think that we need far more bold action in terms of how we turn around our economic fortunes.
Yeah.
We know that the state of our budget is very, very precarious. It needs to get fixed. We know that state-owned enterprises really need to be reconstituted. We need to make sure that we know which state-owned enterprises are strategic and which ones we're going to invest in, and we need to turn them around.
So prioritize your top three things that perhaps the president should perhaps focus on here. What would those be?
So I think policy certainty has to be key amongst them.
Yeah.
Is that we've seen in a number of areas, be it energy, be it health, be it property and land rights, is that we just don't have the policy framework that is going to set us on the right course, that's going to generate investment confidence, that's going to grow the economy and bring many more people into the economy.
And we need to do that quickly, right? We need to set those up quite quickly, because yes, policy takes time in South Africa, but the quicker we get those on board, the more investment we kind of get, right?
Absolutely. And some of those policy processes we sort of midway through, and the new administration is going to come in. So if you look at the integrated resource plan on energy, for example, so we need to finish that off and give ourselves certainty in that space. We need to finalize some of the other key energy policy concerns around the carbon tax, because there's a lot of dissonance in terms of the legislation in that regard.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that the tariff structure for energy is properly conceived for the future. And of course that the Eskom unbundling takes place as intended with the objectives. So policy is one of the key areas. I think state-owned enterprises focusing on Eskom is another. And then of course looking at the state of our budget and fiscal consolidation is key.
Yeah. In focusing on your budget, it means you have to cut out a whole lot of your expenses.
Yeah.
That includes the cabinet positions. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's gotten the support of the ANC in cutting cabinet members. Whether that means just deputies or whether that just means portfolios, we're yet to find out. How good a set of news would it be to cut that cabinet quite dramatically?
So I think we mustn't only look at the public finance impact of an enlarged and bloated cabinet.
Yeah.
I think what we've also got to look at is how efficient a cabinet is and how speedy it makes its decisions and how aligned it is. So for us, we would think it's a very positive signal if that cabinet was far more compact, if the competence of the people that were in the cabinet, but not only the cabinet, in terms of our provinces, in terms of our director generals, key staff within government. We want to make sure that they're competent, that they're capable, that their integrity is beyond question.
Yeah. There's an argument that says that perhaps for a few years, count the year off. Pretty much don't consider South Africa for too much. Wipe it out in a sense that we're shutting a lot of things down and going from the ground up and building with solidity. And then after that, we sort of get growth of hopefully 1%, 2%, 3%. Can we do something like that as opposed to continuously trying to build on plans? We've had every single economic plan you can think of and yet no result.
Yeah, so I think implementation is absolutely key. And what we've seen is that inability within government to really get their hands around certain issues and deal with them decisively. So if we look at the visa issue, that's been hanging over. We've got to sort those things out. Water licenses, it's fundamental for any business, particularly agriculture, the amount of time it takes to get a water license.
Sure.
Pharmaceutical licenses. So the list goes on and on. If we can get some of the fundamentals right, if we can implement them properly, we think that will create a huge amount of confidence.
Has the Small Business Development Ministry sort of been worthwhile for you, do you feel?
So I think there have been a lot of challenges in terms of the structure of small business being outside of the Department of Trade and Industry, because to a large extent it means that Trade and Industry has taken their eye off the small business imperative. But on the other hand, there's been an opportunity to focus on small business issues. I think the model has to be rethought though, because really small business is a segment of business. It's part of business. It's got to be focused on. Every time you look at a piece of policy, you've got to think, what is the small business implication? And if you take into account that small business is probably going to be the biggest generator of employment and of growth, we've really got to focus in on that.
Then the issues of the fourth industrial revolution, of course, which, we can get into that, we can get into education, but the conversation just keeps on going. But Tanya, really appreciate your time. Hopefully we can continue this chat as well some other time as well. Tanya Cohen, the CEO of BUSA, their Business Unity South Africa, giving us some of her thoughts with regards to the election.